Thomas Stonewall Jackson Tom, or Stone, to his friends and family was looking forward to the upcoming weekend as he drove home from work that day. Monday was Memorial Day, but he and Janice, with whom he had lived for 5 years, were invited to spend a 4-day weekend at the country estate of her boss Darren Hansen, senior partner at Remington Law Group, where Janice worked as a paralegal. Stone already had a day off on Monday, so he took the day off to free up Friday. His boss, who was also his father, was kind enough to let him go early on Thursday so he could pack up and hit the road. The trip to Darren's estate would easily take 3 hours, given the traffic on the freeway and the nature of the narrow winding roads leading to Darren's estate. He had high hopes for the weekend. Janice and I haven't had the best relationship in the last 2 months. She became somewhat sullen, snapping at him for no apparent reason. And making love? Forget about it. What had been a hobby 3 or 4 nights a week was replaced, perhaps, by a reluctant, get-it-over-with once-in-2 weeks exercise. Being a caring, loving husband, Stone turned to Janice, hoping to help her overcome everything that was bothering her. But she just waved him off, saying she would figure it out on her own. Worse, Janice constantly rejected his attempts to make love or any physical contact and now often recoiled from him when he tried to hug her or comfort her. The situation was becoming more and more unbearable for him, and he wondered if she was having an affair. She then told him that they had been invited to her boss's country estate for the weekend to celebrate her promotion. A promotion? You've never said anything about a promotion. How long has it been in development? It's been a couple of months, Janice told him. I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. Is that why you've been so harsh with me lately? I think so. I'm sorry, honey. I didn't want to be like this to you. I've had a lot of worries lately, she replied contritely. Tom smiled as he took her in his arms and was saddened when she shuddered slightly. I can imagine, he said, and to think that I was worried that you might be having an affair. He felt her stiffen slightly, but then she relaxed. Of course not, Janice said. I would never do anything like that to you. He heard the words, but something in her tone sounded unconvincing. I'm glad to hear that, Tom forced himself to answer, despite his growing unease. Because you know that's the one thing I just wouldn't tolerate. So, do you think you can get off early on Friday? 4 days in nature would be good for both of us. Of course. I have plenty of free time. We can leave on Thursday after I finish work, if you want. That would be great. I'll let Darren know, and by the time you get home, everything will be packed, she said. I promise, it will be a weekend that you will never forget. Stone thought about those words as he poured gasoline into his new Ford F-150 four-wheel drive pickup truck. A weekend he'll never forget? He could only hope that she meant it in a good way, but some part of him had mixed feelings, especially after the rather serious conversation he had earlier with his father and uncle. He pulled into the driveway, turned off the engine, and headed into the house. True to her word, Janice packed everything and prepared it for loading into the truck. He checked his bags, making sure his things were packed and ready to be shipped. He was impressed that Janice even packed his toiletries in his travel bag. Then he took the other bags. You've got enough stuff here for a week, he joked when she entered the room in cut-off shorts and a t-shirt. I thought we were just going out of town for the weekend. You know I like to prepare for everything, she joked. Why don't you load this stuff in, and I'll finish up here. He saw that she had sandwiches on the counter, and she was packing a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the road, as she usually did when they took day trips for the weekend. That sounds great, he said with a smile. Maybe it's going to be a good weekend after all, he thought. He loaded everything into the truck, helped Janice finish packing the groceries, locked the house, and went on what he fervently hoped would be a good weekend out of town. This weekend promises to be the best of my life, Janice admired as Tom drove. Trust me, you're going to have a great time. I'm looking forward to it, Tom replied, hoping she was serious. It took Tom longer than he had planned to get out of town, due to an accident on the freeway, which brought traffic to an abrupt halt. As a result, they were almost 2 hours behind schedule. But this did not affect Janice's cheerful mood in any way, which pleased Tom. He refueled the gas tank once more as he pulled onto the road that would take them to Darren's estate, and then drove along a windswept road through a hilly wooded area. It was well past midnight when they reached the gate leading to Darren's spacious 2-story house. Janice was given the code to the gate. and soon they arrived at a huge brick mansion. "Damn it, this is a damn big house," Tom exclaimed. 3 men in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck when Tom turned off the engine. Tom wondered, why would they need sunglasses in the dark? "I can pick up our luggage," Tom said, opening the back door of the pickup truck. "Anyway, thanks." "No, sir, that's our job," one of the men said in a voice that had no humor in it. The other man held out his hand. "The keys, sir." "I need to park your car," another man said. "Please do as they ask, honey," Janice offered in a tone that made it clear that he had to obey these men. He looked at the man asking for the keys and saw a distinctive bulge on his jacket, indicating that he was armed. "Of course," Tom said grimly, handing his keys to the second man, while the other 2 men unceremoniously grabbed his luggage and, without saying a word, disappeared into the darkness. "Thanks," Tom said automatically. He watched as the men easily lifted the heavy bags up the steps. "Are you coming?" Janice asked. "Yes, of course. Already on the way." Tom followed Janice and the 2 men up the stairs, wondering why they needed to be armed. Something about it just didn't seem right. "Ah, here you are. I hope you had a safe trip," a tall man with dark curly hair boomed as they entered. Tom recognized the man as Darren Hansen. He met Darren several times at corporate celebrations. Janice and the man exchanged hugs in front of Tom's eyes. Then he turned to Tom. "Thomas, I am glad to meet you again." "I'm Darren Hansen," he said, holding out his hand. "Welcome to my humble abode." "Thanks. Nice to meet you again, Mr. Hansen," Tom said, shaking Darren's hand. "You don't have to be so formal, Tom. May I call you Tom?" "I have a feeling that we will see each other much more often," Darren said with a slight smile. "Especially now that your wife is promoted in the firm." "Of course," Tom said. "I'm sorry we're late." "There was an accident on the freeway," Janice explained. "That's what I heard," Darren said. "I'm glad you got there safely." "Are the others here?" Janice asked. "Others?" Tom didn't know there would be others here. "Yes, they're all here. Unfortunately, they decided to go to bed early. We wanted to have a good rest before tomorrow's celebration," Darren replied. The man who took the keys from Tom came back through the front door and returned the keys to Tom. "Thanks," Tom said, putting the keys in his pocket. By this time, the 2 men who had collected their luggage had returned from the second floor. "Harold, show the Jacksons to their room, if you don't mind," Darren ordered. "Yes, sir," said one of the big men. "We'll see you early tomorrow morning," Darren said. "Have pleasant dreams." "Thank you," Janice said softly, modestly lowering her eyes. Tom noticed it, but didn't say anything. He just put it in the back of his mind. Maybe Dad was right, he thought. "This way, please," Harold commanded in a dead, raspy voice. Tom and Janice followed the man up a spiral staircase and down 2 corridors before stopping at a locked door. He pulled out a key card and held it up to the reader, and Tom heard the door lock open. Harold opened the door and motioned for them to enter the room. "Oh, my God," Janice breathed as they walked inside. The room was spacious and well-furnished. There was even a private bathroom with a double vanity and a large TV monitor on the wall opposite the double bed. A gas fireplace occupied most of one wall. "It's very nice here," Tom said with mock cheerfulness, looking around. "I'm glad you approve," Harold said. He pulled out 2 key cards, one of which he handed to Janice and the other to Tom. "These are your room keys. Please keep them with you at all times. Breakfast will be served tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. Good night." "Good night," Janice replied as Harold left the room, closing the door behind him. "This is a very nice room," Tom said, walking around it and taking inventory. "Yes, it is," Janice agreed as Tom began to hang his clothes in the closet. Janice put her things away, but Tom noticed that she just hung her bag of clothes in the closet without taking out her clothes first. "So, who are these other people that Darren said they would be here?" he asked. "Oh, just some bigwigs from the firm," Janice replied without looking at him. "And this new position? What exactly is it?" Tom followed suit. "I'm Darren's new executive assistant," Janice told him. "This position comes with a significant salary increase, but I'll have to travel from time to time. Does it suit you?" "As long as it doesn't interfere with our lives," Tom said. "You know, we talked about having kids." "I know, but I may have to put it off for a while," Janice said quietly. At least until I get comfortable in my new position. What time frame are you talking about? Tom asked. I don't know. Maybe 6 months. Maybe a little longer. Does it suit you? What is it? She asked. I know this job is very important to you, Tom replied neutrally, wondering exactly what the position entails and knowing that they are not getting any younger. You have no idea, Janice told him. This is a huge step for me. All I ask is a little time and patience. Fair enough, Tom said, taking his wife in his arms. You know I'm very proud of you, don't you? Really? Janice asked in a low voice. Of course, he replied, kissing her on the lips. I love you, Janice. Never forget that. I love you too, Stone, she replied. After they got into bed and turned off the light, Tom reached for Janice, but her eyes were closed and she seemed to be asleep. He sighed, as it had been her habit for the past 2 months. Frustrated, he turned on his side and fell asleep. The sky was clear, dark blue, without a single hint of a cloud. The sun was high and a light breeze was blowing from the south. Suddenly, the sky darkened and was covered with large, threatening clouds. The light breeze turned into a sharp wind that was getting stronger every moment. There was a dull rumble as the sky darkened and clouds gathered. There was a brief flash of lightning in the distance as the storm clouds thickened and the wind increased. A sudden flash of lightning struck the ground right at his feet. When he looked down, he saw a beating heart spewing blood onto the ground. Tom has had this dream many times, except for the beating heart. And every time he experienced this, someone he knew died within the next 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was hit by a drunk driver and died on the spot. The year before, his mother had a stroke just 12 hours after he slept, and she died 24 hours later without regaining consciousness. Tom sat up in bed, and sweat was pouring off his body. He looked at the digital clock on the bedside table and saw that it was 4:15 a.m. Although it was very early in the morning, Tom knew he had to contact his father. Grabbing his phone from the bedside table, Tom noticed that he had no connection. He got out of bed carefully so as not to wake Janice, put on trousers and a t-shirt, then put on his shoes. Grabbing his key card, he opened the door and saw one of Darren's armed guards at a small table in the hallway. A man in a dark suit and glasses looked up when Tom opened the door. Is there a problem, Mr. Jackson? The big man asked. I need to use the phone, and there's no cell service here, Tom said. Who are you going to call? I need to call my dad. It's important, Tom told him. This way, sir, the man said, standing up. Tom followed him into a smaller room off the hallway. You can use this phone, he added, pointing to the phone on the small table next to the chair. Just dial 9 for the outside line first. Thanks, Tom said, sitting down in an armchair. He started to dial his father's number and saw a man standing in the doorway. Can I have a moment alone, please? Of course, the guard said, turning away from the door. Tom couldn't believe the man's self-control. And why was he armed? He finished dialing the number and waited. His father answered on the third ring. Hello, who is it? His father asked him. Tom could tell that the elderly man had just been woken up. Hi, Dad. It's me, Tom. I'm sorry to call so early. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I was in the middle of a very pleasant dream, thinking about your mom, but I'm fine, Tom. Did you have another one of your dreams? Yes, Tom said quietly. He heard his father sigh on the other end of the line. The same as you had before Andy's accident? His father asked him. Exactly the same, Tom said. I understand. Thanks for letting me know, son. I'm fine, but I'll keep my eyes open. Why don't you get some sleep again? Okay, I'll do that, Dad. I just wanted you to know, Tom told him. I appreciate it, son, but I'm fine. I promise you'll stay with me for a while longer, his father promised. Remember what I said and watch your back. They ended the conversation and Tom went back to his room. Is everything all right? The guard asked. Yes, it's all right. Thanks, Tom said before opening the door to his room. He undressed and climbed back into bed, and Janice moaned, turning to face him. Where did you go? Everything is fine? What is it? She asked sleepily. Yes, everything is just fine. I had to call Dad, Tom said. Oh, she moaned before rolling onto her side again. Tom could tell by her breathing that she had fallen asleep again. He closed his eyes, but sleep eluded him for another hour as he continued to think about the disturbing dream. Tom got out of bed at 6 a.m. and went to the bathroom to do his morning chores. After that, he took a quick shower, then changed into clean jeans and a polo shirt. Janice followed him into the bathroom, having previously opened the blinds. Going to the bedside table, Tom took his watch and wallet and looked out the window. He noticed the wrought iron bars attached to the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no playground, and the concrete platform of the driveway had to be at least 8 meters high. Looking out, Tom saw a helicopter landing on the site at least 50 meters from the house. He hadn't seen it before, but it was dark last night when they arrived. He also noticed the guards carrying what looked like rifles on their shoulders. Tom couldn't help but wonder if Darren was expecting trouble. "Are you ready for breakfast, honey?" Janice asked, coming out of the bathroom. "I'm as ready as I've ever been," Tom said, flicking his wristwatch. "What happened last night?" "What is it?" she asked. "Another dream," Tom said. "You mean like before your brother was killed?" "Yes, exactly the same. I called Dad to make sure he was okay." "How is he?" "What is it?" she asked. "Great. I caught him in the middle of a dream." "I bet," Janice giggled, which he found vaguely disturbing when she finished dressing. "Come on, let's go downstairs and have breakfast." "I'm starving." "Don't forget your cane," she reminded Tom. The cane was a gift from his father, given to Tom after he was discharged from the hospital many years ago. During his service in Iraq, the Hummer he was in was hit by an enemy RPG. 2 other Marines in the car were killed instantly, while Tom and another Marine escaped. Despite being severely injured, 2 Marines managed to take cover and defend themselves until help arrived. Tom spent months in surgery and rehab and was eventually written off for health reasons. Fortunately, doctors saved Tom's leg, but he had to have his left hip replaced. The rehabilitation center helped Tom learn to walk again, and the cane helped a lot. Although he could now walk normally, he was still in pain after walking for a long time, so he continued to use his father's gift. They went to Darren's table and found 3 more men and a woman waiting for them. Tom had met these men briefly before and knew that they were the heads of Darren's law firm, although he couldn't remember their names. He had never seen or met this woman before. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce my husband, Thomas Stonewall Jackson," Janice announced. Tom shook hands with the others. "Stonewall, right? It's a pretty unusual name," said Glenn Oldman, one of the firm's executives. "My parents were big fans of the Grand Ole Opry at the time, so they named me after my favorite country and western singer of the 50s and 60s, Tom replied. "Dad used to joke that it was either that or Michael." "Stonewall Jackson. Yes, I think I remember that name," Glenn replied with a smile. "He died about 10 years ago, didn't he?" "That's what I heard," Tom replied. The woman smiled when Tom took her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you, Mr. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you." "I'm Eva Carson," she said. "Nice to meet you, Miss Carson. Please call me Tom. I hope you've heard at least a few good things." "So, what do you do at the firm?" Tom asked. "I'm in charge of training and recruiting," Eve told him. "And please feel free to call me Eve. I've heard a lot of good things, and I have a feeling that we're going to spend a lot of time together this weekend." "Oh," asked Tom. "There will be a lot of changes in your life with Janice's new position," Darren said before Eve could respond. "She's here to help you, to adapt." "Adapt? And why should I adjust to my wife's promotion?" Tom asked, more than a little worried. He looked at Janice for an explanation, but none came. It's difficult," Darren stated bluntly. "Let's have breakfast first, okay? Maybe we can get to know each other a little bit before we get to the point." They sat down as Darren's staff wheeled carts into the room. As Tom watched, they set dishes of eggs, bacon, toast, and fruit in front of everyone. Another employee walked around the table, pouring coffee into cups. Tom also noticed the armed guards who took up posts on both sides of the door. "So, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?" Rick Harmon, another executive director, asked. "Janice says you were some kind of soldier or something." Tom glanced at Janice before answering. He told her a little about his service, but it slipped her mind. As far as she could tell, everyone who wore a green uniform served in the army. "I served in the army, but I was never a soldier," Tom replied before taking a bite of his omelet, which he found delicious. Oh, who were you then? Rick asked, glancing at Janice. I was in the Marines, Tom replied. Thank you for your service, Darren said. What did you do in the Marines, if you don't mind me asking? Not at all, Tom said. I was a sniper scout. I was assigned to the intelligence unit of the armed forces, where I was wounded. A sniper scout, right? Ryan Jones, the third supervisor at the table, said thoughtfully. So, basically, you were killing the bastards, right? Tom noticed how the other executives and security staff exchanged glances before answering. I suppose that's one way of putting it, Tom said. The looks began to express concern, and Tom wondered what was going on here. 32 enemy soldiers did not complete their tasks, he added blithely, but in a tone similar to the warning of a rattlesnake. Although I haven't had to kill anyone in years. The military part of his mind reproached itself. Did he give away his position, or did he warn them? It's interesting that you never told us about this, Janice, Darren said with a slight strain in his voice, looking at Tom's wife, who blushed slightly. It's not Janice's fault, Tom said before Janice could speak. I never told her exactly what I did in the service. Partly because some of it is still classified, and partly because this is a period of my life that I would rather forget. But now you're an accountant. It's true? Rick asked hastily, intervening to defuse the tension that suddenly hung over the table like a cloudy day. Yes, I was discharged after rehabilitation, and I went to college to get a business degree. That's where I met Janice. I'm a forensic accountant now, and I work for my father, Tom said. And what does your father do? Glenn asked. He's in charge of Jackson's specialized investigations. He works mostly for corporations, Tom said. I've heard of them, Rick said thoughtfully. From what I've heard, they do their job well. They finished breakfast, making mostly small talk. But it didn't help the one who had a very unpleasant feeling about all this. He learned to listen carefully to his instincts on the battlefield, as they saved his life more than once. Well, it looks like it's a beautiful day outside. Eva, why don't you take Tom on a tour of the house while we go out to the backyard? Darren asked. Of course, Eve replied. Tom looked at Janice and tried to decipher her thoughts, but he couldn't. She had an expression on her face that he didn't want to play poker with. Go on, honey. It's going to be okay, she said encouragingly, but a little stiffly. Yes, all right, Tom said. He was uncomfortable in this situation, but he felt that there was little he could do right now. So he gave in to Darren and Janice. Intelligence and intelligence. Intelligence and intelligence, he told himself. Grabbing his cane, he looked at Eve. Are you ready, Tom? What is it? She asked with an alacrity that he knew was fake. Of course, Tom replied, hoping that the churning in his stomach would calm down. After you. Janice put her hand on his shoulder before he left, and he stopped and looked at her. Just remember that I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Tom said. He bent down to kiss her, but she turned away. Shocked and humiliated, Tom stepped back and walked away, saying nothing until he and Eve were far away from the main house. Tom couldn't help but notice the heavily armed guards nearby. Turning his back on Eve, Tom pulled out his phone and activated the voice recording app, noticing that he somehow had 2 stripes, a weak signal, but enough to make a call, then put it in his pocket. It's so beautiful here, Eve finally said to break the ice. Yes, Tom replied evasively. They came to a wooden park bench overlooking a small pond and stopped. Eve sat down, and Tom followed her example. What's going on here? He asked. You're a smart man, Tom. Why don't you figure it out for yourself? What is it? She asked in response. I have an idea, but it's too terrible to think about, Tom replied. Why don't you just tell me everything? Good. As you know, Janice has been chosen as Darren's next executive assistant, Eve began. Yes, I already know that. Janice told me about it. But that's not all, is it? Yes, Eve said. Your life is about to change, Tom. Whether it will be for the best will depend on how you react. You know Janice loves you, don't you? I heard her say that. But, to be honest, I can hardly believe it now. Trust me, she really loves you. And she wants the best for the two of you. That's why she's ready to do whatever is necessary to guarantee your future, Eva lectured. You support your wife in her career goals, don't you? Of course. I've always done that, Tom said. He felt the same way he did one night many years ago, when he slowly made his way across the ground, probing the sand for mines under a high-tech heat-trapping cape. I'm glad to hear that from you. Then you should understand that the next year or two will be only a minor obstacle, a bump on the way to a long, happy marriage. A year or two? She mentioned 6 months. Why are you saying this? What will happen in the next 2 years? Tom asked pointedly. And what exactly is your role in all this? I'll get to it. My role is to prepare you for what will happen, and to make sure that you fully understand and accept Darren's expectations. For you and your wife. Why should I care about Darren's expectations of me? I don't report to him, and he doesn't sign my paycheck, Tom growled, and his patience was running out. No, he doesn't do that, but he signs for her. And yours? Tacit agreement. This will make Janice's job a lot easier, Eve explained. Tacit agreement? What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male, Eve declared, as if it were as obvious as a giant flashing red neon sign. In other words, he's a self-centered narcissistic asshole, Tom growled. Eve grinned, and it was the first sincere sound she made, and the first one he believed. Let's just say he expects people they will obey, to do what is expected of them. This also applies to Janice, and, as a result, you. In other words, he wants to satisfy my wife and expects me to just accept it. Isn't that what you want to tell me? His temperature is rising, but for now it is under strict control. I would not use such terminology, but, in fact, yes. In fact, they were already there. Intimate. Several times, Eve said, noticing the pained expression on Tom's face. And you know it from where? Tom asked. I was there. I wrote it down, Eve said in an even tone, as if recording two people copulating was the most natural thing that could be done. Would you like to watch some of the videos? You're joking, right? Not at all, Tom. Here, take a look. It may seem like it to you. Interesting, Eve said, handing Tom her phone. He watched a short video clip in which Janice and Darren copulate like animals. It's interesting. Do you mind if I keep a copy? It would be useful to him in a divorce, he thought. Not at all. I saved this clip especially for you. Using the Bluetooth function of the phone, Tom saved a copy to his phone. Tell me something, Tom. How has your personal life been going lately? Not that it's any of your damn business, but it's been practically non-existent for the last couple of months. Why did you ask? Actually, it's my business. And the reason for this is simple. Darren instructed Janice to suspend you most of the time. He takes great care of his property. What? And she just agreed to it? Tom growled through clenched teeth, and his anger grew. Of course. He's her master now. She obeys him in the same way that all his previous assistants obeyed him. And he will expect you to report to him too. Tom shuddered at the word master. He can wait in one hand and shit in the other. Let's see which one fills up first. Tom growled through clenched teeth. He saw the smirk on her face, and he wanted to wipe it away with the back of his hand. So what does this asshole expect from me? Money? I don't think so, Eve chuckled. He expects you to obedience. Yours, submission. And he will expect you to publicly demonstrate this tonight in front of other senior partners. What are you talking about? What does he expect from me? The dynamics of your marriage will change dramatically while Janice is in her current position. To reflect this, Darren has documents that you have to sign. These documents indicate that you voluntarily transfer your marital rights, property, and assets to him while Janice is his assistant. After he gets his way with you, he'll expect you to kneel in front of him in full view of your wife and the others. And he will expect you to make him feel good. To conclude, Eve said with an impassive face, I know it's hard to hear, but Janice expects this from you. In fact, she can't wait to see how you do it. Thus, you will transfer to him all the powers in your marriage as long as he deigns to own it. Let me see if I understood what you just said correctly. Does your asshole boss want me to sign everything for him? Let him use me? In front of Janice and other executives? Are you kidding me? Tom growled, and murder shone in his eyes. I'm not kidding, Tom. And yes, that's what he wants. He also expects you to swallow it. And Janice, too. Of course, the whole meeting will be captured on video. Of course. That way he can hold it over my head. In my opinion, it looks like extortion or blackmail. It sounds so tasteless coming from you. But it would be used to keep you in line, Eve said nonchalantly. After you obey him, he'll take Janice to bed. They will leave early tomorrow morning for New York, where they will spend the weekend. And where will I be while they sleep in New York? Tom asked. You will stay here, locked in your room. You will be fed and looked after. When they return, you will take Janice back to your residence. You will follow her instructions exactly, without asking questions, Eve replied. So, if I understand you correctly, I should literally be satisfied, forced to humiliate myself in front of him, and then held captive here against my will. And what do I get out of it? If you agree to Darren's program, you will remain relatively unscathed, except for a little humiliation. And when he's done with Janice, you'll be well compensated. And I understand that you assholes and my future ex-wife conspired to destroy my marriage, take away my life's work, and literally rape me in the ass. Am I right? I wouldn't put it quite like that, but I suppose from your point of view, yes. We worked on this together, Eve said in a neutral tone. Did he do this with his other assistants? Tom asked. Yes, Eve said. And they agreed to this shit? They did it, Eve told him. In fact, it gave the husbands great pleasure. What harm will it do? Janice would love to see you give pleasure to her master. I'm sure she would have. They can both kiss my ass and fuck off, Tom hissed. And you can tell that asshole that if he tries to attack me, I'll do everything in my power to make sure it's the last thing he'll ever do. I understand you're angry, Tom, and you have every right to do so, but you would have one in the end. In many ways, not just one. But that's not all. More? Tom asked, shocked. The document requires that you have a vasectomy at the earliest opportunity, and it says that you will accept and take responsibility for any children that Janice and Darren bring into the world. In fact, she intends to put on a show by flushing off her contraceptives after you sign up. And if I don't agree with all this shit? Let's just say you wouldn't like the consequences, Eve said. Some tried to fight with Darren and found themselves penniless, and those convicted of sexual crimes ended up in prison for 18-plus children's videos, which were just accidentally discovered on their personal devices. And you may be aware of what happens to people who commit sexual crimes in prison. It's not a very pleasant existence. That sounds like a threat, Tom replied. Call it whatever you want. Good. I'll do that, Tom replied, taking his phone out of his pocket. He stopped, saved the audio recording, and looked through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. After making sure that there was a signal, he selected the desired number, then brought the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Eve asked, her face flushed with anger. Tom smiled and put his finger to his lips, indicating that she should remain silent. Sheriff Jackson, the man said when he answered Tom's call. Uncle Bob, how are you? Tom asked. Stonewall. What happened? Dad was right. I need extraction. Quickly. Do you have an address? I get it, son. I also have the coordinates from your phone. What is your plan of action? I counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There is a gate at the entrance. The code is 6973, unless they've changed it since last night. Hansen and his 3 supervisors are here, as well as his coach. She just outlined the situation to me, so to speak. I recorded it all on audio. I'll send it to you, Tom said. Acknowledged, Bob replied. Estimated time of arrival is approximately 5 minutes. Can you hold out that long? I think so, Uncle Bob. As long as you're willing to call it self-defense, Tom said. And thanks. With pleasure. I wouldn't want anything to happen to my beloved nephew. What about Janice? According to Coach Hansen, she's an accomplice and already a woman of easy virtue for Hansen, Tom said. I'm sorry to hear that, son, Bob said sadly. Yes. Me too, Tom said. Well, young man, you're doing great. We'll be there soon. With these words, Tom ended the conversation and then sent the audio file to his uncle. What did you just do? Eva asked, startled, after Tom hung up the phone. Who did you just call? I called the cavalry, Tom replied with a smile. I need to go back inside and warn the others, Eve muttered, starting to get up, clearly disoriented by the turn of events. Tom shook his head and gently sat her back down on the bench. She stared at his sniper expression with horror and admiration. I think not. We'll sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes. This may be the last sunlight you'll see for a while, Tom said, allowing himself a satisfied smile. I think you may have bitten off a little more than you can chew this time, Darren, Ryan said after Janice and the four men took their places next to the large pool behind Darren's house. Why? Because Janice's cuckold is an ex-Marine? Big deal, Darren grinned. What's he going to do anyway? He is alone, unarmed and surrounded by a small platoon of armed guards. If he rejects Eve's offer, then we move on to Plan B. Just be careful, Rick warned. Don't worry, Darren said. I have everything under control. We'll add drinks to him tonight, and when the time comes, he'll be more than happy to take from me. I can't wait to see this, Janice cooed. Are you going to make him swallow like you did with the others? Of course, Darren said. By the time this weekend is over, your little wimp will be begging for my organ, he added, making Janice giggle like a schoolgirl. Just don't push him too hard, Ryan said. He's not like the others. They were weak. This one is not like that. They're all the same, Ryan, Darren chuckled. No, it's not like that. This guy is a combat Marine trained to kill. You have to be ready for anything. Calm down, Ryan. I'll deal with it, Darren grumbled. But I'm curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's service? He asked Janice. Well, it's just like Tom said. He never told me any details, Janice replied. All he could say is that he served in the army. It doesn't matter, Darren snorted. He's going down. Tonight. And your career will go up the hill. What if he files for divorce? Janice asked. Then I'll destroy him the same way I destroyed the others. He's going to jail for an adult children's video. Or worse. Don't worry, dear. I'll take care of him. What is that sound? Glenn asked, looking around. Everyone fell silent and listened. The distinctive sounds of helicopters could be heard around them. Suddenly, one of Darren's guards ran up to the pool. We have a problem, Mr. Hansen, he said irritably. What is it? Darren asked. They heard the screams and sounds of men scuffling. Then they saw two uniformed police officers in bulletproof vests walking towards the pool with rifles at the ready. Stop, one of the deputies ordered. Drop your weapon, the deputy told Darren's security guard, who immediately obeyed, not wanting to be shot. Other deputies entered, handcuffing Janice, Darren, and the other three men. What's going on? Darren demanded. I'll take your badges for this. Quiet. You're all under arrest, the deputy said before reading out a detailed list of charges. He ended up reading out their rights. Sheriff's deputies led all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. There were officers everywhere escorting handcuffed and disarmed security personnel to the bus. Janice saw Tom standing next to a large man in a khaki uniform. Tom, what's happening? Stop it, she screamed. Tom and the big man walked towards her. Your little party is over, Janice, Tom said calmly. Janice, this is Sheriff Robert Jackson. You remember my Uncle Bob, don't you? Uncle Bob? Janice gasped weakly. I didn't know you were the sheriff. It must have slipped your mind, Bob said with a grin. Tom, please. This is all a big misunderstanding. You have to believe me, Janice exclaimed in despair. No, Janice. I don't have to believe you. In fact, I don't think I've ever been more shocked and disappointed in my life. I will visit my lawyer as soon as possible to file the divorce papers. From now on, you're dead to me, Tom said. She's dead. With that, Tom grabbed her left hand and took off her rings, putting them in his pocket. You're a fool, Darren growled, unsuccessfully trying to break free from the 2 deputies holding him. I'll be out of jail in no time, and then I'll kill you. Can you hear me? It sounds like a threat to me. What do you think, Uncle Bob? Asked Tom with a grin that far surpassed all of Darren's previous malice. Of course, it seemed like that to me too, Bob said. We'll just add that to all the other charges against him, and it will help to make sure that he will never be released on bail. Don't worry, Mr. Hansen. My boys will take good care of you, he grinned. And your friends. Take these people and get out of here, he ordered the deputies, who immediately obeyed. Tom and Bob watched as the criminals were loaded onto the bus. It seemed to Tom that the last few years of his life had been a lie. He loved Janice from the moment they met. Bob slapped him on the shoulder. "Everything will be fine, son. Trust me on this," he said. Bob had gone through a divorce from an unfaithful spouse many years ago and knew how much pain Tom was in. "Thanks, Uncle Bob, for everything." "You're welcome, son. If you need anything, call me. And tell your dad I said hi. I think he has a bottle of his best wine waiting for your visit." "I'll do that. Is it safe for me to pick up my things? I need to get the hell out of here." "Of course. I think they're almost done inside this place anyway," Bob told him. After they said goodbye, Tom packed up his things and went home. A week later, after meeting his father, Tom met with the family lawyer and filed the divorce papers in accordance with the prenuptial agreement they signed before the wedding. He waited for them to be served before visiting Janice at the county jail. "This will be the first and only time I visit you, Janice," he said as she took her seat. "According to the law, I have to make sure that you have documents." "I took them," Janice said softly. "I have already signed them and sent them back." "Good. As I'm sure you might have noticed, I followed the prenuptial agreement. I'll wait until your trial is over so that get rid of your stuff." "I appreciate that," Janice said. "I don't understand something. How did you find out?" "You'll hear the gory details in court, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I suspected something was going on a couple of months before that weekend, but I didn't have any proof. About 4 months before that memorable day, the ex-husband of one of Darren's so-called assistants turned to Dad with a rather wild story. He also brought several spreadsheets and documents that he said his ex-wife had received from Darren's system. Dad made me look through the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't tell you anything about privileges, conflicts of interest, and the like. It took a while, but we finally found what we were looking for: evidence of all sorts of nefarious financial transactions with some rather dubious individuals. Your lover did a great job hiding them, but not well enough. A couple of weeks before that weekend, Dad turned over everything he had to the feds, who were more than interested in Hanson's affairs. In fact, they were going to raid your offices sometime in June. Dad said that I had to be very careful that weekend. He relayed what his interlocutor had told him, although it was very difficult for him to believe it. We talked to my Uncle Bob, who, as you know, is the sheriff of the county where Darren's property is located. I hoped nothing would happen, but that's not how it worked. Eva Carson told me what you and your lover were planning. By the way, I recorded this little conversation. I am glad that we live in a state where only one party's permission is required for such a recording. Nevertheless, I have a few questions for you." "What do you want to know?" Janice asked. "How long before that weekend did you sleep with your so-called master?" "About 2 months," Janice replied. Tom was surprised that she was so outspoken. "Around this time, everything went wrong with us." "Did he tell you to interrupt my communication?" "Yes," she said softly, and her face turned red. "Then maybe I should get tested for sexually transmitted diseases," Tom said, causing Janice even more embarrassment. "You really wanted to see me sucking off your lover?" Janice lowered her eyes, refusing to meet her husband's gaze. "Well?" he pressed angrily. She looked at him again with tears in her eyes. And again. "Yes," she said. "Of course, you knew that I would never willingly agree to this. I'd rather die first." "So why is that?" "Because I was so in love with Darren that I would have agreed to anything he wanted. You don't understand. He liked the feeling of power over everyone around him. And if I hadn't obeyed, he had what he called a plan B," Janice admitted. "You mean the pills?" "Yes. They found a vial of a chemical that he intended to use against me." "I had nothing to do with it," Janice said. "It's interesting because they found your fingerprints all over the bottle," Tom said, causing Janice to look at him in shock. "Which tells me that you were part of his conspiracy against me." No, I never meant to hurt you," she sobbed. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Janice. You didn't just cheat on me. You plotted with your so-called master to destroy me as a man. So there's no turning back?" "No, never. No forgiveness. Nothing. As I told you that day, you're dead to me," Tom hissed as Janice shed hot tears but didn't flinch. "I've spent enough time on you already. Goodbye, Janice. Enjoy what's left of your miserable life." With that, he got up and left, impervious to her tears. The epilogue. After several court appearances, Janice, Darren, Eva, and others were found guilty of all the charges against them. As the ringmaster, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, which meant he would never be paroled. Having played a minor role in Darren's illegal financial schemes, the three executives were sentenced to 20 years in prison. Eva and Janice were given slightly milder sentences for their participation in the Darren schemes. Several other employees of the firm have been charged for their involvement in the conspiracy. Several people supported the state's testimony against Darren and were granted immunity as part of the plea deal. By the time the smoke cleared, the Remington Law Group no longer existed. Tom's divorce from Janice went quickly and without a hitch. Due to Janice's incarceration, Tom packed all of her belongings and put them in storage so that her parents could pick them up at their convenience. On the 4th of July, Tom, his father, and Bob celebrated Independence Day like the rest of the nation with a barbecue and fireworks. Bob brought the guests to the celebration and introduced her to Tom. He was instantly captivated by the attractive, slender, brown-eyed brunette standing in front of him, and it was hard for him not to stare at her toned legs, accentuated by a pair of short denim shorts. "Son, this is Marcia Simmons. She just moved here from Dallas and started working with me a couple of weeks ago. Are you a deputy sheriff?" Tom asked. "Of course," Marcia said with a confident smile lighting up her face. "She's an ex-Marine too," Bob said. "Marcia, my nephew also served in the Corps. A sniper from military intelligence." "Semper Fi," Marcia said. "Hooray," Tom replied. "I think you and I will get along just fine." Tom broke into a wide smile. "I think so too," Marcia agreed. "Will you buy the girl a beer?" "Of course," Tom replied. "I wouldn't mind a fresh one myself." He took 2 beers from his father's refrigerator and handed one to her. "Your uncle told me about your last one, operations. It sounds beautifully executed," Marcia said as they sat down. "I'm sorry about what you had to go through with your ex." "Yeah, okay. I think it happens," Tom said quietly. "The divorce will be final soon. What about you? I saw the mark on your ring finger. Were you married to?" "Yes, I was," Marcia said. "Obviously, my husband wasn't like that, if you know what I mean. One evening I came home early and found him in bed with his secretary. In my bed, no less." "I'm sorry to hear that. If you ask me, he was an idiot," Tom told her, looking at her figure. "I agree," Marcia said. "I'm just glad we didn't have children." "Do you have children?" "Fortunately, no. We talked about starting a family, and then everything went to hell." Tom and Marcia talked for most of the evening and were delighted when Bob and Tom's father set off the fireworks. By the end of the evening, Tom felt much better. At least he believed he had met a kindred spirit in the march. "Are you ready to go back, Marcia?" Bob asked after they finished the fireworks. "I think now is the right time," she remarked before turning to Tom. "I had a wonderful time, Tom. It was very nice to meet you." "I had a wonderful time too, Marcia, and I'm very glad that I met you. Actually, I'd like to see you again, if you don't mind." "That would be more than good, Tom," she said with a big smile on her face. "Here's my number," she added, handing him a card with her cell phone number. "Your uncle keeps me busy, but I'm usually free on Saturday nights. Call me." "It will be done," Tom said, returning her smile. He took her card, noticing his uncle's wink and smile. "I'll call you this Thursday. Then we'll talk," Marcia said before kissing him on the cheek. They said goodbye and left. "A pretty young lady," Tom's father said after they left. "Yes, she's very sweet," Tom said with a big smile. "I hope you intend to keep your promise to her," the older man said. "Absolutely," Tom said. "Good boy," his father said, slapping Tom on the back. "Come on, help me clean up, and let's see if we can finish the rest of this beer." "Are you going to give me the day off tomorrow to sleep it off?" Tom asked. "Hell no," his father replied with a laugh. Laughing in response, Tom joined his father, thinking about the cute brunette with the most attractive legs he had seen in a while.